Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, not to be confused with the Crypto Hippie. I am a podcast host and I interview amazing people all around the world, entrepreneurs, founders, executives, artists, you name it, all around the world. And today I am bringing you a special treat. This man introduced me to Bitcoin back in 2017. In June 2017, is my first person I knew in the industry, and I am really excited. And his name is Morgan Rockwell, known as the nodefather, and he's a mycologist at Microsoft, and a lot of really cool things. So, Morgan, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, buddy.
You're very welcome. So let's kick things off, and I'll ask you first. I know a little bit about your background, but what is your background? Is it a logical background? And what's your Bitcoin story?
Um, well, when it comes to Bitcoin, my adventure down the rabbit hole, as they say, began around Occupy Wall Street, um, in one form, but also it began before that in another form. Like, when we think of Bitcoin as a monetary thing, it began mostly because of that protest that was happening in front of the banks in New York and around the world, and that's what put my attention on it as a monetary thing. But I was probably like the seventh or eighth person to actually like start reading and working on Bitcoin because I was in the mailing list in 2008. I was privileged to be given the idea about Bitcoin while I was in San Francisco doing construction, and it kind of was given to me as this computer science project. I was working on AI beta testing stuff for Google, which became the speech to text assistant that everyone uses at Google these days. So I was trying to get a job at Google working on that, and it was like a computer science renaissance in my mind at that time. And so the Bitcoin white paper was another brick in the wall, as Pink Floyd says, to that whole thing. And so I looked at it as wow, this is going to be the way robots use money. This is an important thing to learn for the Internet of Things and how to get things to buy things from each other. I should learn how this works. So I started working on it and learning it and reapplying the things I was doing to use it. And then 2010 comes around, and suddenly Bitcoin has like a dollar value. And that was in the midst of this post 2008 apocalypse of the economy. And so there was a lot of protesting going on, and the bank bailouts had happened. Lehman Brothers went away. I was a construction worker, so I lost my construction worker job because of the economy. And I wanted to know where my money went. And so I was aware of Bitcoin as a computer thing at that time, but it it transformed into a monetary thing because of its necessity to escape the banking system and its power to do so. So that kind of was like my two-tiered path on why Bitcoin was important. I started with it being important because I'm a computer nerd, I'm a computer scientist, I'm a robot builder and AI designer, and I figured, wow, this is going to be important for that, for science, computer science, and learning the way the mining system works and the full node ledger works and the peer-to-peer wallet works. Wow, this is like an innovative piece of computer science, and the Byzantine general problem it solved was like astounding computer science work. So I was so profoundly interested in it as a computer thing. And then I realized how much I needed it when my money started being messed with by bosses and by, foremans and bankers above them, and the whole trickling up of who controls my money was brought to my face. So I have like two stories I tell people about my Bitcoin origins, whether it's the computer science one, which was long before, or the financial one, which didn't happen until Bitcoin had a dollar value. And so that's kind of my root there. And it's, I'm a scientist. My goal in life since I was a little kid was to always be a scientist. I really wanted to be an astronaut as a scientist and go to Mars. So I tried to study engineering and aerospace and biology and geology and what would be useful to like go to Mars one day as an astronaut. And that childhood dream has not happened, and there's been many events in life that have made me think that it will never happen, and then there's been a few that have made me think it might still happen. So I always considered myself a scientist, and I had to focus on the science that was going to maybe make me money. So I really put my brain into computers because I knew it was the industry, and the internet was being birthed when I was a kid, and so I figured that was the important place to focus. But in hindsight, I was born here in San Diego, which is somewhat of a desert. If I was born in the forest, I probably would have been a mycologist studying the forest and fungi since I was a kid. We're like a product of our environment, and I was in a military town where computers are something you have to learn to be good in the military if you can't shoot people well. And so that was what I focused on. But in my later years now, I'm focusing on biology and the biological computers and the food supplies and the medicines and the materials of the world. So I have transitioned over the last 15 years from a Bitcoin developer into a mycologist, and that's kind of my next phase in life that I've built for myself. Which they have parallels, and they have a lot to do with each other, and they have a lot of similar associated sciences. So I think computers and fungi are very intertwined, metaphorically and physically, and there's a lot of cross knowledge you have to have to work in both fields.
Awesome. So I'll never forget. I knew you were into biology and science. I'll never forget our conversation we had in Vegas. You and I met in Vegas,
Yeah.
and we had some chicken and waffles, and that was pretty good. We were talking about the biology and the mycology and all that stuff, and you you had done a couple things. Like you paid for Bitcoin. We paid for steak dinner with Bitcoin. We did a
Yeah.
slot machine in Hotel D with
Yeah.
Bitcoin.
Yeah.
You know, um, what are similarities are you working on now with as a mycologist that you were working on when you were developing back then? I mean, it's really the same thing, right?
Well, it's like there's a lot of complication there, but like to make it as simple as possible, like almost all of the machines of the world, uh, they simply use these programming languages like assembly language, like C++ or C sharp is considered an assembly language. And it basically means you tell a machine, if this happens, then this happens, or else this happens. And it's logic. And you could write it in English in that form of what's called syntax. So you could tell a machine with these little, haiku poem lines what to do instead of having to write it all out in binary. So it's a very important language, the C++ and the other assembly languages. And so all the Internet of Things devices, whether it's your toaster, your fridge, your Raspberry Pi and Arduinos, which you were able to buy at Radio Shack and build things yourself out of, or all the Intel Internet of Things chips that they put in everything, the Alexa devices, all of these things that are supposed to be the smart things, the Internet of Things. They're basically just a web server and a little computer chip put in every device you can imagine so that every device you have in your life is connected to each other. And they all use assembly language to talk to each other. There's some other languages used, like things like Node.js, JavaScript, and things, networking things to make them talk to each other. But in simple terms, every machine uses assembly language. And like the Bitcoin ATM was created for the first time in my garage in 2010 in my company Bitcoin Kinetics, and we made a Fujitsu bill loader for an ATM, spit out $100 bill when we sent $100 of Bitcoin to a Bitcoin address. So it was a very simple piece of code that made that happen. If this Bitcoin address receives $100 worth of Bitcoin, then make this machine turn on or off. And when it turns on, a $100 bill would come out. And then we got a little more detailed with it and, started programming different things to be done when Bitcoin transactions happened. And so that's considered, in my opinion, the very first smart contract for Bitcoin. But it's also it was called Bitswitch. Originally, it was called the Switch and Timer based Bitcoin payment system, which was boring. And so Bitswitch was a better brand. And now there is a gentleman building the Bitcoin Switch, where he's taken that idea to a whole new level, and he's incorporating the Lightning Network and things like that. And so this idea has been open sourced for 12, 13 years. It's the basis of every Bitcoin ATM. But a lot of the other smart contracts that were built in Ethereum and Solana and all these ideas, they came from that smart contract as an idea. They've all gone their own path on how they do things now, but that was the first. And I thought, what could I do to make Bitcoin more usable? And at the time, I was trying to make Bitcoin used for not just money, but for science. I was building a lot of projects on Bitcoin's second layer called Counterparty, and you could create tokens there just like you can on Ethereum, but they're built on Bitcoin. And so I was building tokens to keep track of sugar and glucose and calcium in the forest floor. And I was building longitude and latitude tokens to keep track of GPS movements, but put on the blockchain. And I made tokens called humans and births to keep track of birth certificates on Earth to try to do an actual population counter, and all kinds of cool science projects that I thought could be logged into the Bitcoin blockchain for timestamps and integrity of data, birth certificates, death certificates, real estate deeds, all the things that were said that Bitcoin could do one day. So I was working on those things, and they all need a machine component. So, you need a device in your hand and Congress to vote. I wanted to make that thing work on Bitcoin's blockchain. We needed a bed to tell me how many hours I was actually sleeping in it. I want that to be set on the Bitcoin blockchain. So the Fitbit like data is recorded forever, where I can sell it and use it. And so when it came to like biology, I wanted to put biological signals into the blockchain, whether they were bacteria, fungi, virus, life signals from hearts. I figured this data could be put on the Bitcoin's blockchain, where it was monetizable for people or private if they wanted, and it was shareable across the blockchain ledger across the planet instantly in a database way. And so I, was living in the forest at the time in North California, and there's plenty of mushrooms growing in the woods, and fungi is a very under supported education. There's not too much work at the time being focused on it. Until recently, it wasn't even like a trendy thing to talk about mushrooms. And so I wanted to do some science on mushrooms and fungi and learn a little bit about the forest, which the fungi are a very important part of the ecosystem. They're pretty much the largest organism on Earth. 60% of all the biomass on Earth is fungi. And so I wanted to understand how that was working with nature and how we could use it as humans and build upon it. And so I started plugging devices into the forest floor that were reading humidity and temperature and electromagnetic signals and voltage and spectrometers that could pick up sugar, calcium, and phosphorus, and basically broadcast those signals over the internet into a blockchain transaction, Bitcoin transaction, log them into the blockchain, and then another device in another area of the forest plugged into the ground was reading that data wirelessly over the blockchain from the blockchain Bitcoin Explorer, which is publicly accessible data. You could just throw something in a transaction using a term called op return, and you could store any text or data in the Bitcoin transactions. And so that data from the node that's plugged into the forest floor was putting those life signals out every 10 minutes in bursts, because we didn't have the Lightning Network at the time. And another device, maybe 100 yards away in the same forest, was reading those signals and then broadcasting those signals through electrical pulses back into the ground. And I was doing this in somewhat of a Frankenstein experiment to try to see if one part of the forest can communicate with another part of the forest wirelessly using the internet and Bitcoin. Because it is known to biologists and mycologists that the forest communicates under the ground with itself from bushes and trees and microorganisms, all using the mycelium network, like the internet. Mycelium is like the vegetative, the root part of all the fungi. And there's trillions and trillions and trillions of connections underneath the forest floor, millions of miles of mycelium under each footstep. And it's a very intertwined web, kind of like the internet. And so when a bush needs more water, it'll send a signal to the tree, and the mycelium will move nutrients and water under the forest floor, like circulatory signals, like blood vessels, also like brain cells. It'll move electrical and signals. And so I wanted to upgrade the Earth and give it access to the internet and give it some wireless capacity and see if it could communicate from one forest to another where the mycelium is not connecting to itself. And so it's very, Frankenstein stuff, but it's what I would consider the basis of a biological computer. And there are people that have taken that work and, connected mushrooms to synthesizers and let mushrooms make music. And there's people on TikTok doing that. And it's I'm not the only one plugging computers into mushrooms, but I'm probably one of the only people. So it's a very pseudoscience, mad science. Who knows if it's going to have any output that is useful? But I believe it's important to understand what's going on in nature. And we have Elon Musk over there plugging computers into people's brains, pigs and monkeys. So I feel like I'm a little validated in plugging computers into the forest floor now. I'm not too crazy.
I use a very interesting word there, Frankenstein. When I got into Bitcoin initially, I eventually got into Ethereum too. But what was going on in 2017 was this inquiry. It was this area of growth, of thinking what's possible, of exploring. That's what you're doing. And recently, over the past couple of years or so, it's been more. There's been an influx of newer people into Bitcoin, saying that Bitcoin is the only way. There is nothing else, and it's this. And so that exploration, that open-mindedness, to me, has become a Frankenstein arena where
Yeah.
people are closed-minded. So let me
Yeah.
know your thoughts on that.
Well, so to put on my computer science engineer hat, and like toot my flute a little bit, I have been privy to sit next to Vint Cerf, who invented TCP/IP. I got to talk to him for 5 minutes at Google, at the Google Next conference. I got to talk with Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the World Wide Web, for 10 minutes at a conference, an internet identity conference. And I also met the man, I can't remember his name, who invented the SSL certificates, the little green lock on your website that makes HTTPS work. And so I got to sit next to some of these old wise wizard men who invented all of the internet. And if you don't know who Vint Cerf is, he created TCP/IP for ARPA, the Department of Defense, which is the basis of the internet. And Tim Berners-Lee, working at the CERN Particle Accelerator, invented the World Wide Web and the .coms and HTML websites and all of that. And I got to sit next to the creator of JavaScript. And he did a speech for about 30 minutes, where in that speech he explained that JavaScript is like Swiss cheese, and you could cut 90% out of it and it would still work. And that's why it's not very safe. And so from the horse's mouth, I've heard from all the horses' mouths, the roots of all of these technologies that we're dependent upon, and how they were architected, why they were architected, what was unsafe. And I was not a pen tester or a hacker at the time, but I was the open-eared person. So I got to listen to a lot of these very important historians and architects of everything we use, and I got their perspectives, and I built my own perspective on that.
Is what?
Let's see, over the course of using Bitcoin for so long, I've gotten to talk to a lot of the people who work on Bitcoin. I was asked by Charles Hoskinson and Joseph Lubin to come work on Ethereum before it was public. And so I got to know everyone in the space that was there. I've talked with everyone from Roger Ver to Nick Szabo to Adam Back, who supported me when I was fighting the federal government over Bitcoin. And so I know all these people who have their thoughts in the space as engineers and creators. And I've created some stuff, some important stuff, whether it's the voting protocols that Ethereum flaunted as one of its great projects, or the Bitcoin stuff like the ATM. And my view is that something like Ethereum, in theory, was going to be great, and it was going to be a great innovation. And I started working on it because I thought that. And then the business hat comes on, and you start talking with people about money and seeing who's shaking people's hands. And then you start hearing whispers of agendas and motivations and, all of that kind of stuff. And that started to turn me back towards Bitcoin only because of those types of interactions that were happening. And it's not unknown now that Goldman Sachs's vice president of technology, Joseph Lubin, was the chief operating officer of Ethereum, created MetaMask and Consensus, and has funneled quite a bit of Goldman Sachs money into that project. I don't consider that a good or bad thing in this time in my life, but when I was 21, and I considered that a bad thing because Bitcoin was being built to counteract the banking system, and I felt having the banking system put its financial fingers in everything was biased and dangerous. And so that was my first red flag with like another project other than Bitcoin, in particular Ethereum. And then I saw countless times of projects that were being built on Bitcoin being flaunted that they would work better on Ethereum. So the engineer hat comes back on, and I want to know why they say that. And when it comes to things like smart contracts, I built a smart contract that was living inside of a machine. The machine could be offline and it would still work. It could listen to the network and broadcast a block header. It could actually connect to the internet and read a block explorer, or it could download the whole full node and just read from its own Bitcoin ledger and didn't even need to be connected in that manner. But that was my idea of what a smart contract was. And Ethereum's idea of a smart contract was vastly different. It wasn't just held in some form of what we could consider a cloud or online in a shared database. It was also not written in C++. It was written in first in JavaScript, and then a new language that was made specifically for smart contracts as a JavaScript-like derivative. And as someone that heard from the JavaScript creator that it was dangerous, I didn't like that. So that was a second red flag on how these things are being built. Not just the money was first, but then how they're being built. And then over the years, you see that the Ethereum blockchain was forked to erase the transaction, so its untamperable history was tampered with, and that put another nail in the coffin of that idea for me. But the final one, which is really complicated, is I used to do, and I still do occasionally, some consulting work for the Department of Defense on Bitcoin. And I'm very hyper aware of the nuclear field here in the United States because I applied to be a nuclear propulsion engineer for the Navy when I was young. So I studied nuclear physics and I studied how nuclear um, weapons, nuclear power facilities, nuclear radiation and fallout, and how all of that worked so I could get a job doing it. And one of the things you learn is that SHA-256 is the encryption scheme that our nuclear codes, the football that the president has next to him, and the biscuit, which is his private key to those nukes, how that is all used and created by the NSA using SHA-256. SHA-256 is famously known as the Bitcoin's algorithm for mining. It is also used in the elliptic curve digital signature algorithm, which connects the private key to a public key. It is a scheme to encrypt those keys as well. So Bitcoin basically needs SHA-256 to exist. So do our nuclear warheads. And the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, the agency that says how much an inch in a gram is, they come out and they make these SHA-1, SHA-2, SHA-3, these algorithms. The NSA puts out pieces of them that says, hey, the SHA-2 uses these 8 constants, these numbers. We say what they are, and that's how it works. So there's a little interagency creation of these things. And then they go public because the public needs them. They're weapons grade munitions, but the public needs them like the AR-15 to protect themselves, so that we give them away. So SHA-256 has been around for a long time, and it's used for Bitcoin and nukes. And one day SHA-3 comes out. This is better. This is the new one. And Ethereum says we're going to use SHA-3. We're not going to use SHA-256 like Bitcoin because we're going to be different. And the first question I ask is, why are we using SHA-256 on nukes and on Bitcoin if this SHA-3 is so new and so good? And Bitcoin is hard to change. So Bitcoin's not going to change. It's going to be SHA-256 until something goes bad with it. But why would the nuclear weapons of this country not upgrade to SHA-3, this brand new, secure hash algorithm, which is so cool? And Ethereum says it's so cool, so we're going to use it. My concern is, if it's not good enough to protect the nukes, it's definitely not good enough to protect my money and my assets and my, monkey pictures and my birth certificates. Because if it's so new, why isn't the most threatening weapon on earth using it? Why is it using the older version? And my theory from understanding the engineering is that SHA-3 has compromises that are based around things like prime numbers, which any calculator could find. And it's comparable in the way that in the 90s, if you had a prime number, a very large prime number, you can now download the DVDs onto your computer because that was the private key for that DVD. It was just a big private number, but it wasn't really a private number. It was just a prime number that anyone could find. But it's so big that not many people would find it. And so that was not really good security. I mean, it was a DVD, but I wanted to download it instead of buying it again. And so that's where all the DVD rippers started using this prime number. So in my understanding, that's how SHA-3 is built on that type of architecture, which means that Goldman Sachs or the devil or Vitalik or someone may have a master private key to a lot of things around Ethereum, including the creation of Ethereum, the changing of it from proof of work to proof of stake, the forking of the network, or just the turning on and off of certain smart contracts or changing them. And that fear or that concern was the last thing that made me give up on that project and any project that pontificated itself in the same manner. Because other than, say, Litecoin and the jokey copies of it like Feathercoin and Dogecoin, there's not been a project I've seen since that has made its own algorithm or used an algorithm in a different way or made its architecture a little bit different than Bitcoin for a reason that has survived and has use. And I don't want to say that Bitcoin is the only thing that works because I do believe things like Litecoin work. I think Dogecoin is a joke, but it works. It works horribly, but it exists. It functions, and it doesn't have the necessary flaws to destroy society. I think Ethereum has these huge um, potential flaws to destroy society if people use it, and it's built in that manner. Now, all of the cool things that Ethereum says it could do, I will always be an advocate and say 90% of those things could and have been done using Bitcoin, whether it's the second layer of counterparty or the second layer that is new, the liquid network, or just doing it on your own terms because you don't need no permission to do anything you want. You can make anything use Bitcoin. You just have to write a program in a way that uses Bitcoin. So you can do all of those things without depending on Bitcoin, but anything can use Bitcoin. I think Ethereum builds an ecosystem where you depend on it to do all those cool things, and you have to ask or follow its rules to do those things. When if you want to do NFTs and voting and build DAOs, you could do that in your own form of code, and you could make them all interact with Bitcoin or anything else. But there's no permission needed to use Bitcoin, and so I feel there's a misconstrued view of um, building on top of the layer one instead of building something that uses the layer one. And I've always been in that idea that we should just use Bitcoin. We shouldn't necessarily build things on top of it, but we should use it. And I think Ethereum goes the other way. And unfortunately, I think a lot of projects are mimicking that architecture, which doesn't mean those projects' ideas are fail. They won't fail, or they don't have fail mentality. It's that they're building on castles of sand instead of on rock, you know. And I feel like that's a big bad habit in the entire industry.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, you just said made a lot of sense. I've brought back in my mind like 4 or 5 cybersecurity interviews that I've done and you know, Shore's algorithm and all that stuff. And what you just said makes a lot of sense. So thank you. And
I try. I try, you know, but like that's my view. I just
mhm.
feel that those security questions and the almost the philosophy of why are you doing this, how are you doing this, and who are you doing this with and for, those should be asked no matter what you're building. And it's not like, oh, this can be done on Bitcoin, fuck all these other things. And this could be done on Ethereum. Bitcoin is not capable of doing these. That's not what I would say. It's be a scientist, trial and error, experiment, and then actually like look at that data and go, um, this has the potential to cause harm. This maybe doesn't have the potential to cause harm. And when you're building technology, you should always be concerned about the potential for harm. And Bitcoin could buy nukes, but Ethereum could, you know, destroy the entire world by running the entire centralized digital bank currency on top of it in a manner that one person can control it. And that's bad. So why would we want a system that has the abilities to create that kind of bad? To me, that's like a nuclear bomb being released to the public. It's like the fractional reserve banking system is more dangerous than the nuclear bomb. Why would we want to allow everyone to have a push button fractional reserve bank at their fingertips? That sounds like a nuclear bomb in everyone's pocket. Now, if Bitcoin was in everyone's pocket, that sounds kind of like a Swiss bank in everyone's pocket. And the Swiss are notorious for, you know, keeping their mouths shut and keeping your money in the box and not letting people take it who don't need it. I think that's where you have to put your step back and go, what kind of harm is this thing going to cause versus the kind of harm this thing is going to cause? And as a scientist, if you're going to make a deadly virus or you're going to grow fungus into a computer that could, like, you know, take over the world, you better start thinking about the harm first before you know, write that code. Frankenstein's monster um, could kill everyone, but really the people with the pitchforks were really the scary monster in that story. So, Ethereum could harm the world if it's done in a wrong way. But you know what's even worse is if it screws everyone's financial and private life up in some horrible way, and all of those people burn the planet down with anger because of it. Um, that's a scarier monster than Ethereum. It's the outcome of the mistake it being done. So, like Bitcoin, in my opinion, could cause some crazy things to happen, but it's not as scary to me as the things that Ethereum could create. So that's where my mind weighs. So I would say anyone working on anything should weigh the pros and cons really deeply before you create these tools.
So I'm going to talk about tools in a little bit, but I want to follow up on what you said. You talk about Frankenstein's monster, right? You said you noticed this year, there was a CFI
Yeah,
implosion that was
yeah,
mainly caused because of Terra Luna and other people, right?
yeah,
And I'm not going to name names, but everybody knows they are. you know,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it,
yeah.
it's a, and certain things are happening, like Compute North and mining companies in the U.S. are going out of business, and Russia's hoarding ASICs. What's the Frankenstein's landscape look like?
Well, I'll say that I put my money where my mouth is, right? So I've watched the stock market all week, and I would say that buy a bunch of defense stocks, because Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, they're all releasing new toys. We just got our brand new, amazing, scary bomber released, like a new iPhone, and they presented it as such, which is pretty scary. Um, we have to think of war as Americans because we've been at war for over 250 years nonstop, whether you know it or like it. And when it comes to Bitcoin and the centralized currencies that are built around it, the stable coins, and all the art NFT billions of dollars money laundered through OpenSea, the massive amount of money that is moved in this space, whether it's only $1 to $2 trillion, and all the rich people in the world say that's insignificant to the 200 trillion the U.S. is in debt and derivatives. It's still a large amount of money. 50 to $100 million was donated to the Ukrainian military to buy flak jackets and guns using Bitcoin. And we can't deny that Bitcoin is a tool for war. It's a tool used in war. Ethereum was used in the Ukrainian military as well. So was the Tether stablecoin built on top of Ethereum. It was probably used for heavy amounts of money laundering and stealing of those funds, and maybe bringing it back to the United States to donate to politicians in an illegal manner for handshake deals. And there's like a massive amount of war always happening, and currency war, financial war. As someone who did war games for the United States military on Bitcoin, there are plenty of people that did gold war gaming for the last 50 years, 100 years for the US military. And the stable coins and the centralized exchanges and the decentralized algorithms to do exchanges are all being used in war games of potential enemies of the United States using these tools to build armies, to pay for spies, to pay for dissent, or to pay for sabotage and attacks. And so those tools being used in that way, whether you like it or not, that should be the forefront of every developer and Bitcoiner. Just like anyone in World War I and II was conscripted to be a scientist or a soldier, and if you knew how to build a Jeep or a gun, or you knew how to invent penicillin, you were usable. You're a scientist, but this is important for the war. And I think there's a problem that we're not told we're in World War III or World War IV, and there's a lack of what used to be called patriotism or nationalism for good reasons. And no one knows who to support. No one knows if the United States is the good guy or bad guy anymore. And do we know if Russia or China is the good guy or the bad guy? Do we think El Salvador is the good guy now? We don't know. There could be dictatorship and innocent people thrown in jail for smoking weed down there. But, they support Bitcoin. So are they good guy, bad guy? And, the U.S. Just brought home a pothead from Russia, but, there's still potheads in prison in the United States. So it's like, who's the good guy and the bad guy and what rules we should be following? In Bitcoin and all that centralized stuff and all the decentralized stuff is a part of that giant board game of war. And I think it's not necessarily done on purpose by powers that be, but all of the failures, whether it was the Luna thing or the potential of Tether constantly being argued that it would fail, and the pushing of the Circle Coinbase dollar to be better than the Tether. This is just War 101. This is the United States pushing the petrodollar on Saudi Arabia and Nixon threatening to nuke them if they don't sell oil for dollars. And they're the Saudis are going to shake hands for the Russian Chinese yuan and the renminbi, and they're going to say we don't need the U.S. anymore. And wow, if they do that publicly, that's 100% a reason the United States would go to war. Every time some power that be that was our friend decided to say bad things about the dollar or not use the dollar, whether it was Gaddafi saying he wanted a gold-backed dinar for the African Union and make a currency for all of Africa, for the African people to be independent from France and the United States and China, he was killed 3 weeks later, dragged in the streets and raped on YouTube. And the same with Saddam Hussein, who was our partner, who we gave weapons to attack the Iranians. Colin Powell shook his hand in the desert and gave him tools. And then he said he was going to sell his oil for euros instead of dollars. He was taking that money to rebuild the Hanging Gardens of Babylon in Mesopotamia's home, the Babylonian city of what Iraq and Iran and Syria and Afghanistan all used to be. And they killed him 2 months later after finding out he was not a friend of the dollar. He was trying to get euros in mass. And so there are plenty of historical events that when you are being used by the United States and you turn on the US dollar, that you're going to, head's going to roll. And so I would say that it's scarier than some guys running a centralized exchange trying to rob people. It's very scarier and more serious than that, because there's the creator of the MakerDAO that died days after he said the United States intelligence agencies were going to kill him, and he was found in a beach a day later after he tweeted that. And that was a week or two after millions and millions of dollars of the MakerDAO, which is a stable coin, was constructed to be used for another company, and it potentially was to take it off the market so that the USDC and the USDT, which are battling each other over at Coinbase and Circle right now and at Binance, that maybe we don't need a third one. Let's get rid of this one. Well, there's a guy that made it, and he's saying very mean things about the people in the United States, power elite, and we need to make him not say those things. So he's dead. And that's war. And so you think you're a cool little 12-year-old, you could go push a button and make an ERC20 token that creates your own stable coin. You could go ask the AI chat GPT, create a stable coin algorithm for me, please, to make this stable coin stable. And it spits the code out. And now you're 13 and you're a millionaire because you made a stable coin and you got a bunch of it and it works. You just competed with the United States military that has nukes and B-21 bombers and Predator drones. And they don't like that. They pay for those things with US dollars. And they're not buying flapjackets in the United States with tethers. They're not buying them with Circle and Coinbase dollars. They're buying them with Treasury-backed dollars. And so if you interfere with that system that builds the biggest weapons on Earth, don't expect that any of those weapons will not be turned on you. And that is, as a globalist kind of person or an internet citizen, a Bitcoiner who's, sovereign and libertarian, you go, screw the United States. These are the bad guys. I don't like the defense industry and the military industrial complex and the military financial complex. I'm going to fight these powers. But are you a U.S. citizen? Are your children U.S. citizens? Are you living on the U.S. economy? Are you building a society on the internet, on internet companies that are United States companies? Are you turning on your country or the economy or the government that helped build all those things? Are you driving on the freeways and drinking the water that Hoover Dam and federal funds put together? Are you an American or not? And so my view is, if you support, you got to pick who you support. Do you support the internet? Do you support the United States? Do you support China and Russia? Do you support Coinbase or Binance? Do you support Tether or the Binance dollar? Because that's really the loyal. It's not the flag you're waving on your ship and the flag of convenience. It's not the flag you're waving in front of your house. It's what dollar you're using. And that's really important to understand because if you create something, the Terra Luna, the dollar, and then you rob Americans who are dependent on the actual dollar, they're going to feel that they lost actual dollars, not the Terra Luna dollar. And then if you're creating FTT tokens at FTX, and now I lost my dollar value in those people are still loyal to the crown. They're the redcoats. They're loyal to the dollar. They're not loyal to FTX. They're not loyal to Binance. They want their dollars back. As someone who lost Bitcoin on Mt. Gox, I want those Bitcoin back, but really, give me the damn dollars. I want the dollars you took from me back at the very least. And so you'll never get that thinking out of a human being. We'll never get there where we're Star Trek credit only until all of this stuff becomes unified. Is it going to be unified to the renminbi, the yuan, the ruble, the dollar? What flag's going to be flying over the entire planet of 9-10 billion people one day? And is it going to have the US dollar logo on it or the Tether dollar? It's definitely not going to have the Terra Luna, right? So I know that's a long answer, but you have to understand that these centralized exchanges and the decentralized programs are tools that are used to build society. They're civilization tools. And some civilization tools are used in war. The tank and the Jeep and the Hummer were used in war, but now people drive around in Jeeps in the desert and have fun with them. So the centralized exchanges are tools of war, currency war, World War III war tools. They'll eventually, one will succeed, and we're going to all get it like the Jeep on the street where we get to use it. It's great. But right now, don't be blind that these things are not just for commercial use. They're for nation toppling use. El Salvador making Bitcoin legal tender was not done for fun. It was done to topple the IMF, to cause a stick in the spokes, to weaken them where other countries do the same. And that UN institution is utterly destroyed by that type of attack. And that would be something that Russia and China and India and Japan would go, we're going to do the same thing. And now we can topple the government that has suppressed us. And then that's a World War III moment. People get, World War I started with a bullet. Don't expect that billions and trillions of dollars disappearing because of Sam Bankman-Fried or any of these other people that did these things at, Three Arrows and Terra Luna and, all of the leverage stuff that was done on BlockFi and all of the things like that. Don't expect those people to take responsibility because they're ignorant. They're business guys. They're not military people. They don't support a country. They all ran to different islands to be in tax havens. They have no flag flying above them. They're mercenaries. And until you see someone who's putting the United States flag and saying Bitcoin is for the US, we're going to win, or someone doing the same for China like they did at one point, or the same for Russia, I would hope that we become one planet, one government, and Bitcoin and all the things around it are used. But some people are very afraid of that. I mean, in my patriotic, military-minded house, because that's how I was raised, I definitely don't want the Chinese and the Russian government being the government that I'm under. Um, I want the internet to have its own government. And if it's going to have centralized exchange of currencies there, that's dangerous. So we shouldn't even be building things for the future that way. And it's just the common man wants to make money, and mostly in their home currency. And they don't understand the large, complicated dynamics of nation building and nation destroying that's happening, and how currencies are being used to do that, which is pretty scary.
Yeah. Wow. It is. We put it that way. It is very scary. Wow. So,
But a 20-year-old picks up a gun. He's scared. Man, it's World War II, but I got a wife and kids. I got to go fight for them. I mean, I'm fighting for them, not for the United States. I want them to be safe. So if you're gonna be ignorant of that, that's cool. But if you're not gonna be ignorant of it, don't be scared. Just know that you're building your world. You're building your internet. You're building your country. You're making your country better by building these things. But don't build them in a way, and don't promote these cool things in a way where you're ignorant that it's civilization. It's life and death stuff. It's not a scary thing, it's a serious thing. But don't let that deter you. And it is scary going to war, but man, the zombies will come to your door if you don't do it. And so it's probably scarier if you don't go to war. So I mean, I don't want to put that. I always put that vibe out whenever I talk to anyone about Bitcoin. It's war is always on my mind, and I know it's a scary thing, but I would say embrace it and find a comfortable place knowing that, and build on that, because that's where you're going to have success. The guys that built the Jeeps and the AR-15s for the military, they're successful now. They're great. GM owns that stuff. You go build some stuff knowing that it's going to be used in this way, whether you like it or not. You might as well like it, and find your moral compass for all of that. But you know the guy that built the spear saved humanity. It's sad to think that the spear kills all these people, but it kept us alive. It's a two-edged sword, as they say.
so I I want to thank you very much. This has been an amazing conversation. I want to thank you very much for your time. It was great catching up. I have one final
Yeah,
question
sure,
for you, and
sure.
it's an easier one. You're you're rebuilding Bitcoin Inc. as a Delaware corp that will offer a new suite of tools to Bitcoin users. How can
Yeah.
people find out more information about that and about you? How can they do that?
Well, I haven't put out too many details on my plan there, but I formed Bitcoin Inc. in 2015, and we did a lot of different projects that didn't get monetized. And my real goal is to build this forward-facing product that would allow everyone in the world to use Bitcoin. And I feel like all this great open source work is kind of messed up because there's not they're branded in their own way. And I've always just wanted a Bitcoin wallet to have the Bitcoin logo on it and to just be called Bitcoin wallet, none of these other names and none of these other companies. And I think it's important to have the Bitcoin app at the top of the app marketplaces with the Bitcoin logo on it. And it should just be called Bitcoin. I feel like all these other names are brand confusion. The Bitcoin brand is great. So I'm gonna build what Satoshi originally had, which is the Satoshi client had a wallet, a full node, and a miner all in one program. And the developers over time separated those. They didn't want the miner connected to the wallet because they didn't want the mined Coinbase showing up right on site where the miner was. People might want to steal that device. And so they separated the miner out of the program. And then it became Bitcoin Core. And so it's got a full node in it. But then people started using other wallets on their phones and hardware wallets. And so basically, Bitcoin Core is just a node now. No one really uses that wallet anymore. And I feel that is separating the importance of having them all in your hand, wallet, full node, miner, because that is self-sovereignty. When you hold your funds, you keep track of the entire record yourself, and you're authenticating your transactions by mining them. That's the whole point of Bitcoin. All three need to be together in your hands. And otherwise, you're trusting third parties to be your miner or to be your node or to be your wallet. And I feel that has caused a lot of people to go down very dark paths of ignorance. So I'm going to put them all back together the way Satoshi intended. I'm going to have a Bitcoin hardware wallet, a Bitcoin full node, and a Bitcoin miner as three separate devices that you can literally stack on top of each other in your home, like a little Alexa device. You could take the hardware wallet with you. You could sync it to your phone, but that wallet connects to your own full node at home, and that full node is being mined upon by your own miner as a solo miner. And you can decide to connect any wallet to that node. You could decide to connect any miners or mining pools to that node, or you could use your solo miner. I'm just going to give you the three tools that you need to do it yourself if you want. And I believe that's what Bitcoin Inc. should be doing, is building a single product that is a wallet, a full node, and a miner. They're going to be beautiful orange cased little hardware devices that stack on top of each other. They connect to each other using like QR codes and NFC. So you could literally just touch them to each other and they all sync together. And it'd be very easy user interface. So a kid could just buy this thing like a PlayStation, put it on their counter, and they have the whole Bitcoin ecosystem right there on three devices that stack together like one device. And as someone that wants to spend Bitcoin, you could use your hardware wallet and go spend at restaurants and stores with it, or you could sync it to your phone and you can use your phone to do that. And I feel like making something that is simple and aesthetically pleasing, like an Apple product, but also like all of the things you need to run Bitcoin by yourself available in one go, one purchase, is important. It doesn't exist right now. You could go set up your own full nodes. You could go buy hardware wallets from 20 different companies, and you have to depend on other people to mine for you. So that needs to change, in my opinion. I want to have a Bitcoin program and hardware suite where you just push one button and buy it, and you're set to use Bitcoin without anyone else. So that's kind of the like plan. I gotta hire people, and I have to do all the structural integrity of a corporation and a trust and an LLC, and have it all set up in a way that is pleasing to investors and pleasing to the Bitcoin community. Everything will be open source. And I got to find people who want to do the work, the hardware, the software, the user interface, the lawyers, all of that stuff. So I'm going to start the company from scratch. And if anyone wants to help me do that, you could find me on Twitter. My email is nodefather@gmail.com. I haven't put up a website for the project yet because I'm in the building and recruiting phase, but eventually I'll get a cool Bitcoin domain to do it. And I mean, that's the plan, is to make the Bitcoin company. My dream would be to have a Apple-sized headquarters and to have 50,000 people working together in a building on Bitcoin, and to have a giant Bitcoin logo on it in Silicon Valley or in some other city like in Austin or something, and to build a Bitcoin company that pays developers, that pays for Bitcoin development at the core level, that builds hardware and software, sells Bitcoin ATMs around the world, and puts Bitcoin commercials on the Super Bowl and Bitcoin commercials in Times Square, not FTX commercials. I feel like that's important to get done. It hasn't been done. I've been trying to do that for like almost a decade and have failed horribly. But I'm going to keep trying to build the Bitcoin company because I believe Bitcoin is such a great open source project. It just needs a home and a group of people being paid to work on it. And I think I can help get that done.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, man, for having me. I appreciate it.